Let's move on, because I wanted to ask you guys. There's big talk today, and I want to read you part of this article about Arsenal going into the summer. Will this improve them? Is this the right thing for them to do? And I'll read this to you now. It states, Mikel Arteta is determined to oversee a major shakeup with a big-name striker and winger on his hit list. Arteta is a huge admirer of Isak, but Benjamin Sesko, who is allowed to move 55 million, is more realistic. There is also the talk of Semenyo or Nico Williams joining Arsenal, along with Zubimendi. This is also tied in with a new director of football, with Dan Ashworth being one of the priorities coming in. So there's talk of Arsenal spending around £250 million this summer, a new sporting director coming in to add, is someone external to the football club coming in for them to rejuvenate part of their team, add more firepower. But it does sound like Arteta is going to be the main man in this, in terms of the manager leading them forward. Don, is that the right thing for Arsenal to be doing? Investing more money into this team, buying the striker, buying someone like a Nico Williams, and going again. Do you see those types of signings being enough to get Arsenal potentially over the line next season?
100%, man. 100%. I think, it's very clear to see that Arteta prioritize buying defenders over attackers. He spent more money on defenders than any other position, and right now you can see, bro, with all the injuries that they've had, obviously, you can't predict getting this many injuries, but even before that, it was only really Saka in their attack that was performing consistently this season. He gets their most numbers. Away from him, you're looking at the left wing options, Martinelli, Trossard. They definitely need an upgrade there. They brought in Kai Havertz, who's not a left centre mid. He's not a striker, so you've still got a hole in that position. And there's so many games this season, bro, where you can look at it and think, if they had a striker, very similar to Chelsea, if they had a striker at the end of those chances, they win that game. I can think of the game against Newcastle, when they got knocked out of the cup. If they had an Isak, right, that was the main difference in that game. They win that game. Against United, they had some crazy chances Havertz is missing. If they had a striker in that game, they win that game as well. So that's got to be a priority, man, because this whole time you're bringing in Jesus, who, we know that this guy was not clinical at Man City. His best performances watching Man City week in, week out for me were actually on the wing. You know what I'm trying to say? You bring him in, you expect him to elevate his career and whatnot. He's falling off a cliff, Obviously, you bring in Havertz. So he's never actually prioritized bringing in a guy that knows that role inside out, because Arsenal defensively, bro, even this season, like I keep telling you, that's the main thing that's been keeping them in games, right? They've got a lot of draws this season because their defense is able to keep them in games, So I think it's now time to release the shackles, man. Trust your team. You've got Saliba and Gabriel, one of the best pairings in Europe. You've got Declan Rice, who for me ain't great as an 8, but again, off the ball, he's very good defensively. He can help in terms of the counter press and obviously winning the ball back as well, right? And again, bro, you got some decent fullbacks. So the solidity is there. It's now time to prioritize going forward and winning games, that way, bro. That's what I would say for Arteta now. He needs to focus on the attack, man. Enough defenders. They've got enough defenders, bro.
But here's the thing, Don. Let me ask you this. And you don't have the answer for it, but I'm still going to ask it anyways. Isn't that probably the biggest problem with Arteta? Because you're saying remove the shackles. I don't know if he will. I don't know if Arteta as a manager and as a man, that's the way he thinks. I think maybe he thinks of his approach of football is a little bit more defensive than when we thought. Like a couple years ago, we probably thought he was trying to be Pep. He ended up being a lot more defensive than we thought he is. And that's why I totally understand, by the way, building the back line before you go forward. I always think it's a smart approach. You start with the goalkeeper and in the back line, and then you move up the pitch. I think that's always a smart way to build a team. The thing is, though, I think his tactics and I think that the way he thinks as in football, I think he's just more pragmatic than we thought he would be. And I feel like this is the real Arteta, not the Arteta we see in the first title race when they were just scoring for fun. And I think it's going to be more of this. And this is probably the question that we should be asking. Should Arteta take over this project moving forward? Not because of him being, was he good over the last 4 years or not? Or is he ever going to win a trophy or not? Is he the guy to actually start looking at football that way? Because I don't think he is. I don't think he's as attacking as Pep was. I don't think he's as attacking as Klopp was. I think he's much more pragmatic. And I think as long as this crop of players play under him, their approaches are always going to be more defensive.
Yeah,
so
I get No, I get where you're coming from because when you look at we've known Arteta for a while now, but let's be fair, innit? We've seen him attacking teams, and we've also seen him kind of have PTSD from that first season where he's focusing more on the defense, right? That's what I'm saying. This summer is going to be a clear indication as to how he wants to play going forward. Because you've got to look at the profile of player that he brings in, bro, right? That first year they competed, Martinelli and Saka, there wasn't that much pressure on them to perform. They just had the freedom to play. You had Jesus came in, he gave them the freedom to play. Obviously, they had Saliba come into that season as well. Him and Gabriel had a good pairing. Xhaka offensively was very good that year. That's another position they're yet to replace as well. So, for example, if they bring in someone that's more attacking minded in that left center mid role, you bring in a better left winger that can offer you more goals on the left, right? Straight away, it changes how your team's playing. You know what I mean? Whereas right now, when you're playing Declan Rice, who's not an 8 in an 8 position, you're playing Havertz, who's not a striker over there. You're looking at the left wing, it's stale. It's going to affect how you attack. You know what I'm trying to say? So for me, I've got to look at who they look to bring in this summer, and that will determine what style of play he's trying to implement going forward. You know what I mean? Because right now they're a bit stale in it. You know what I mean? The attackers that they've got just aren't it. Let's be real. That's the main problem for me. I think if he brings in the right personnel, I think you'll see them attack a lot better.
Yeah, but that's the question. Can he bring in the right personnel? Because there's been question marks. We just talked about Havertz, Jesus, and players like that. Trossard, I thought, was a decent signing actually for what he was. I know he's not great at the moment, but for what he was, came to be in the squad player, I thought that was a decent signing. But that's going to be interesting. Can he spend the money well? Can he get his targets over the line? He was reported he wanted to sign Watkins. Couldn't get that over the line because of whatever with the board not releasing the funds quick enough or whatever. So, on paper, it sounds great, doesn't it? Like 250 mil, that's if he does get 250 mil. And then you can get all your dream signings and then you're the super team. It's all ifs and buts. We've heard this. We used to hear this with Arsenal every around this time of the season every year. War chest. Arsenal going to give Wenger a war chest in the summer. And what would happen? They'd just go and sign, Peter Cech. And that was it. So yeah, like if they do spend 250 mil, it's going to be a big boost. They'll get some flops, of course, but you got to trust they'll probably get some gems in there. And it's just whether
when you say you've heard this before, though, does that compute with the other side of the criticism of Arteta? That he's had £750 million and not one. Because if we're criticizing him for having money and not spending it, at the same time, are we still able to say that Arsenal never spend any money?
No. Listen, I'm not saying that they never spend any money, but Potts has made this. He's an Arsenal fan, but he says basically he feels like why they're not spending now and have spent before is because the owners want Champions League.
And they're achieving their goals, so that's it. And no more spending, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're in Champions League. We're getting in coming out. We don't then have to go and push to get. And it was when they dropped out of there. That's when they started trying to spend and get into it. So there could be some validity to that. We will see where their ambitions lie in the summer. If they are ambitious and they have that money to spend, and they go out and spend it, then that'd be big. Dan Ashworth is an interesting one because obviously we see what happened at Man United. I know Man United fans aren't rating him, and the talks of him wanting to get Southgate as the manager for Man United, wanting to keep Ten Hag instead of making a change earlier, that would raise huge red flags and question marks. Like if he's involved, I think in identifying players and that might be a worry. So it depends on what his role is going to be. Arteta, for me, maybe has a little bit too much power and sway in the modern game, like over.
Yeah, I actually think more so. Listen, I get the point about the upper limit of Champions League. This summer, I think, will be an indicator as to whether or not that's true. If they do go out and spend 200 odd million, it shows that I think that demonstrates they're not satisfied. It depends on who they buy with that money. If they go out and buy 8 youngsters, then maybe you could be right. They go and sign 3 or 4 really good players. I also agree with you. I think the biggest thing they've got to guard against and push back against Arsenal fans, and I think it's maybe one of the things they're ignoring the most is the power that Arteta has. Whether you rate him or not, I just think in the modern day game, a manager having too much power is dangerous. You've seen the transition at Liverpool from Klopp to Slot, and that's because typically speaking, Liverpool buy players for the club. They build what they build is for the club. So that when a manager leaves, there's a transition, and they've got that perfect. And Arsenal just need to guard, because whether he wins you trophies or not, Arteta, there's a day he's going to leave, and you always need to be prepared and ready for that. It's been spoken about for years at Man City that they always have a short list of managers. And when you look, or whenever you've looked at the names, now some of the names have gone off the boil since they were first read out, like Ten Hag. You look at the way those managers play football, and you can see the synergy in style between the profiles of players that Pep's been bought and those managers. What you haven't seen is a sort of a huge pragmatist link to the job as a replacement for Pep ever, because why would there be? So I think that's really important for Arsenal. There's a comment I wanted to put up here from George Harrington, who says, I've been seeing Kimmich, Shesko, a centre-back and left-back and right-back to be our lookouts this summer. I mean, I would be so surprised if you bought any more right-backs or left-backs, if I'm being honest with you. But yes, Kimmich's name came up today as a potential player that Arsenal might look at. He's not going to get a new deal from Bayern. He's going to be available for free in the summer. Is this the type of thing they should look at? You're shaking your head, Staffy. You think Arsenal should avoid Kimmich, in your opinion?
Bro, always stay away from these players that already achieved a lot. Listen, I understand what people are going to say. Oh, the mentality, but he's a winner. Da, 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 da. It rarely ever works. When you really look at it historically, the players that played in some of the top clubs that won Champions Leagues and leagues that are in their late age, I promise you, they never come in with that hunger that you expect. Their experience is much appreciated. Don't get me wrong. But they come in, they're on big wages, and I'll be honest with you, they rarely ever deliver. They rarely ever deliver. He's already achieved everything. Thiago, look at the chat. Chat is actually dropping examples that I didn't even think of right away. They come in, and I'll be honest, I'm not dismissing anything Kimmich achieved, but honestly, this guy grew up in Bayern, spent his whole life in Bayern, won everything in Bayern. He's German. He won everything. I see very little motive to why he'd come into this Arsenal team and he'd be the one that takes him over the line. I'll be really honest with you. I don't think that's the right signing whatsoever. There's a myth that these winners come in and they get you over the line. When you really look at history, it rarely happens. It's more times than not does it flop than it actually works. You can look for leaders, don't get me wrong, but you can look for players that are ready for that extra step and they come in and they actually want to win things that they haven't won before. They could be like players at that age, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a Kimmich. Like, I just don't see what a Kimmich does after all these years he spent in Bayern when he come to Arsenal and get him over the line. I don't see it. Look at Casemiro as an example. He's been a pure example. Thiago, same thing.
No, facts, bro. And with Arteta, yeah, this guy needs to have some self-awareness, bro, because like you talk about these owners, yeah, the Cronkies, we know that these guys are reserved, right? They're going to give him the money to spend, but they're going to give you a little, you know what I'm saying, pocket change. Like, here you go. That's the money there. You go spend it wisely. Don't come back and ask us for more, right? So if they've got that mentality, you can't be overly taking risks. Kai Havertz was a big risk, yeah? I know he's come in and he's added some numbers and whatnot, but they still have 2 holes in their team after spending 65 million on this guy, right? Yeah. So it's time to now go for players that, you know, are proven. You've got enough evidence to say, okay, these guys can actually help us kick on now, rather than going for the hip star or, you know, the risky one, because you know the Cronkies, bro. If you blow that money, they're not gonna give you more. You know what I mean? They're not gonna give you more like that, bro. You gotta be careful. You know what I'm saying? So